All right, well, it is the top of the hour, and we are so excited to be back live. CubiCasa community managers, Tammy, Dwight, and myself. We're excited to have a, a different kind of conversation today. We're not going to be talking about real estate photography today or about floor plans so much, but we're going to be talking about our interactions and how we communicate, which is, I think, super, super, super important. And I'm going to turn it over to Tammy so that she can introduce our guest and we can get ready to jump right in.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And thank you everyone for being here. So I am so excited for our presentation today. So since Mark and I arrived here at the beginning of this year, we have sort of been focusing on things that would help you photography wise and floor plan wise and business wise. But just the piece of being able to interact with your clients and really anyone in your life is so important. So for me, I have had times where, you go on a shoot, you are so conscious about making sure everything is charged, you're ready to go, you have your backup gear, you have your plan in mind, you get through traffic, you arrive to your shoot, and you're excited to start shooting. And then for whatever reason, like there's some sort of blocker, like you just are not hitting it off with your client. And sometimes it's really hard to figure out that piece because we're all invested in making really great work and building really great relationships. So we are so lucky to have Cassa Hanon with us today because she can help us maybe unravel when you get into a situation like that, how to quickly flip it so you get back on the same page with your client and you can get back to creating great work. So Cassa is a technology leader and she's focused on team and leadership building. She's an educator at Stanford Graduate School of Business, and she teaches a course on innovation at Washington State University. And she has some great ideas for us today that are going to help us communicate better. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Cassa.
Tammy, thank you. What a great way to set the context for this conversation. It really is about how would you like to be described as the easiest person to work with? They are just so easy to work with. That's really what we're talking about today. I love that Tammy actually proposed this topic of hack your interactions because we will be looking at that. And even though I'm trained as a computer scientist, more recently, I have found the science that's helped me be most effective comes from neuroscience and psychology. The idea of understanding the CPU and the operating system that we have up here in order to be as effective as we can be. So that's what we'll be looking at. I'm going to share some observations that you can make about yourself and others, and then adjustments that you can make that will have them describe you as the easiest person in the world to work with. So let's dive right in and look at that. What I'm sharing today is based on the Myers-Briggs personality assessment. I am a big fan of personality assessments because I just think it's fun to have a way to discover something about yourself. So I like all of them. Myers-Briggs, I am certified to use that one because it is the most widely used personality assessment around the world. And that means there's a lot of data behind it and a lot of research that backs up the assessment. Myers-Briggs was developed by a mother-daughter team, and it is based on the theories of Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychiatrist. And Carl Jung's theories are that we are all born with certain preferences, certain ways of doing things, or ways that we like the world around us to be, almost like the default settings on a device. When you take it out of the box the first time, there are default settings. Now, you can change, it can do all of the functions. That device can use all of the functions, but the initial default settings are what will be used first. And that's a little bit like what the theory says, that we have inborn preferences for the way we might behave or the way we like the world around us to be. Let me talk a little bit more about that, because we're going to talk about 4 pairs of equal and opposite preferences. So what do I mean about a preference? I'm going to have you do something with me here right now. If you are sitting at a desk and you have pen and paper handy, please use that. If not, if you're just listening from somewhere else, then you can mock this and mime it like I will do now. I would simply like you to sign your name. Sign your name for me like you would be signing a contract. We can do this together. Okay. All right. Now that you've signed your name, I'm going to ask you to do one other thing, and that is using the opposite hand, sign your name again, like you're signing a contract. Okay. And let's think about what you noticed. Most people will describe that second experience of signing their name as awkward, more difficult. They had to really think about it, and the results were not as good. Okay. This is a simple illustration for what we mean by an inborn preference versus using the opposite. So when I first asked you to sign your name, did you have to stop and think about which hand you would use? No, it just came naturally, and you didn't even think about it, you just did it. That's a preference. If you needed to get good at using your opposite non-preferred hand to sign your name, could you do that? Yes, you absolutely could. You practice and practice until you could use both hands equally and sign your name. That's what we mean, that everybody can do both, but one comes so easily to you. It is so natural. It takes less mental energy, and it's really your comfort zone. That's where you want to be. Okay. Those are the ideas of the theory behind it. If we go with this theory that we have inborn preferences, then we actually want to interact with people to allow them to, as often as possible, be in their comfort zone. So let's dive in. Let's start looking at, again, 4 pairs of equal and opposite preferences. And when I say equal and opposite, I mean there's not one way to be, not one inborn preference is better than another. There's no best preference to have or to be born with. They're both equally valuable, but you'll notice really opposite. So the first set of preferences that we'll look at is really commonly talked about a lot in the world today, really, and that is the idea of extroversion or introversion. Jung's theory would say that we're born with an innate preference to be paying attention to the world around us, the people and activities going on around us, or an inborn preference to be focused on our inner world, our own thoughts and reflections, and being most comfortable with some of that alone time. So let's look a little bit more at that. Those with a preference for extroversion really prefer to communicate by talking. That is how they think and process their thoughts. They really are comfortable speaking. They are often described as being very expressive. Their emotions may show more. They may use a lot of gestures. They're simply expressing themselves in a very visual and verbal way more. They tend to have a lot of broad interests, interested in, again, drawn to the people and activities around them, so interested in many different things. This is a source of energy for extroverts. They're getting energized by interacting with others and participating in activities. And they can easily talk to anyone about anything at any time, whether they know anything about it or whether they know the person or not. Now, on the opposite side, those with an inborn preference for introversion, they really do prefer to communicate in writing because they like having that opportunity to complete their thoughts mentally before they're communicating. They are more likely to be described as contained, harder to read, maybe having a bit of a poker face. They have deep interests. So when they get interested in something, more likely to want to know absolutely everything about it and peel back all the layers. They're energized by having that time to think, by spending time alone. That's how they replenish. They also can easily talk to people they know very well or about subjects they know very well. So in both cases, you may see somebody that's just able to talk easily and go on and on about it. But for an introvert, it's more likely to be with people they know or a topic they know really well. So equal and opposite ways. Now, across the general population worldwide, we're about half and half. So if you're just wondering, well, it seems like extroversion would be more prevalent or introversion would be more prevalent, it's about half and half. And everybody's adjusting to each other all the time. We all get good at doing both, but one comes naturally to us and energizes us. So what can you observe to give you clues as to whether somebody has an inborn preference for extroversion or introversion? Extroverts tend to talk faster, say a lot more words, and they're so likely to interrupt people. And they interrupt themselves. Remember, they're talking in order to think. And so they're not even completing that thought. They're interrupting that thought because they just had the next thought and they're verbalizing that one. So more likely to interrupt and interrupt themselves. Talk really fast and use a lot of words. Always thinking out loud, okay? Introverts, more likely to wait for space. They're much less likely to interrupt someone in order to speak. They're waiting for a pause in the conversation, and they may be slower to answer a question. There's going to be just a couple seconds longer gap before an introvert responds because they're usually constructing their answer mentally before they start verbalizing. So those are observations you can make. And what would you do to adjust in order to interact with this person in their comfort zone? Well, if you're an extrovert, practice giving people space. The thing about extroverts is sometimes they can actually experience anxiety when there's silence in a conversation, and they'll want to fill it. And they may be helping that person to respond by continuing to talk, which actually has the opposite effect. So really practice allowing space. And if that's what you need to do, you can even say, I'm going to go give yourself a task. I'm going to go carry this out. And you're giving that person a few minutes of alone time to replenish. And you're giving yourself comfort time to go and do something and be active while that person has time to think. If you're an introvert, you can actually tell people what's going on. You might say something like, you know what, I need a few minutes to think before I can comment. Or I do want to answer, but I need some time to think first. Just let them know that that's what's happening. Because otherwise they might be filling in the blanks and saying, oh, she hates it. She doesn't like what I've done at all. Oh my God, she thinks I'm terrible, because you haven't yet verbalized anything. And so they're going to decide what you're thinking and just unwilling to say. But given that's not what's going on, tell people what is actually happening for you. Now, the last thing, and this is really the most powerful thing you can do, this is the real secret. If you don't know, you haven't interacted with that person enough to decide, I think they have this preference versus that preference, or if they've just gotten so good at adjusting, they don't demonstrate one preference more than another, you can ask. Just get really good at asking someone what they prefer. And you would say something like this: do you like to process out loud, or would you rather have time to think? Ask that. Just insert that question in, and it's going to seem very natural. They will tell you, I need to process out loud. Can we talk? Or they will tell you, yeah, I need a few minutes to think. And then you can go and do something else and give them a few minutes. Okay, that's the first pair of preferences. We're going to do another one, and then I'm going to pause for some questions just to see if we have things coming up in chat that I can answer. So the next equal and opposite pair of preferences is about how we take in information. How we take in information that we like and trust first. And this is really important to know when you're trying to build trust in a relationship or establish your credibility. So this is a good one to pay attention to for that. And it's really quite simple. Some people want details first. Give me every detail, especially if you can tell me in sequential order, and then I'm going to reach a conclusion. Other people want you to start with the big picture. Just give me the big picture first, and then I will have a home for the details. Then I will know which details I want to know more about. So is this someone who likes and trusts details first and builds to the big picture? Or is this someone who likes and trusts knowing the big picture first and then asks for details? So that's the distinction. We all will do both. It's just, which do we like and trust first? So what can you observe about somebody else? The biggest clues are really, how are they giving information to you? Are they someone who is reciting things in sequential order? When they tell you a story, do they tell you exactly this happened, then this happened, then this happened? Or when they tell you a story, are they kind of starting in the middle and saying, oh, well, I forgot to tell you, she had arrived late, and they're filling in the beginning for you? That's a big picture thinker, a big picture person. Are they someone who really gives you accurate details and based on using their 5 senses? So detailed people like things in the present that they can experience and use with their senses. So they are going to describe how something smelled, what color it was, with a detailed description of coloring. They're going to describe what it tasted like, what it sounded like, and how it felt. They're going to use a lot of descriptive words associated with the 5 senses, and they may use a lot of accurate measurements. So these people are going to love CubiCasa solutions, because accurate measurements are just a real appeal for the people who like and trust details first. Okay, so what can you do to adjust your behavior to best be giving people information in the way they prefer? If you notice this person is coming in, and let's say you're both walking into a piece of a property for the first time, and they start by describing the mood. Oh, I love that this feels like family. You can tell there's history here. It has a sense of warmth. These are big picture thinkers. Or are you walking in and they're saying, ooh, high ceilings, updated countertops? They're actually rattling off details, almost like the keyword list, and they're rattling those off. They are starting with details and will reach a conclusion. So you can do the same thing. If you are interacting with somebody who's big picture, start with a narrative, tell a story. Here is the mood of this property. Here's the history of this property. These are the people who were here. Here's how this piece of property has been used before. These are the kinds of events that have been here. Or if it's a detailed person who likes and trusts details first, then rattle off the keywords. provide, this is the square footage, this is the year it was built, this is, because that's how this person is getting to know this piece of property. That's the information they like and trust first. The other important thing is, because they're fond of accuracy, if they ask a question or need a detail and you don't know the answer to it, don't guess. Say, I don't know, I will find out. And then get that detailed piece of information versus, oh, I think it's roughly this square footage, something like that. Say, oh, let's find out exactly what the square footage is and get back to them, because they love accuracy. The other way that you can build credibility with somebody who likes details is to provide a detail they might not know. So you might say something like, well, did you know that this building material is from a sustainable source? And start describing those things. Suddenly you are now gaining some credibility because you are adding to their treasure trove of details, and they value that. Okay, so the last powerful thing you can do, the most powerful thing you can do if you just have no idea how this person prefers to take in information, you ask. And what that might sound like for this preference is, how would you like to begin? Do you want me to start at the 30,000 foot level, or do you want me to give you the detailed specifications? And you simply offer to give the information to them whichever way they prefer, and they will tell you. Okay, we've talked about two pairs of equal and opposite preferences, extroversion and introversion. So what's energizing us and what we're paying attention to, and then how we take in information. I want to pause, Tammy and Marc. Tell me if we have any burning questions in the chat that I can answer before we go on.
I don't see any so far. Anastasia, do you have any coming from Facebook?
And that's fine.
No,
Back to, we have a question?
I was just going to say, it's
yet.
just so awesome to get the information, because it's really, I'm thinking about people that I interact with, in the real estate world, realtors, and how, different some are. Some are really on one, and I think we tend to think of realtors as all extroverts, but not all of them are. So, there's a mix between the two. And then even with how people, receive information, some want to get straight to the point. So it's really been great so far. So I'm learning and taking notes.
That's great. Thank you. The other thing is, this is why I say, it's about half and half. So we tend to make assumptions that more people are a certain way because different professions seem to require that. Mm-hmm. And it's a reasonable assumption. The other thing is that in some cultures, like the culture in the US is very much emphasizing extroversion, especially with the advent of social media. There's this expectation in our culture that you should be expressing yourself and very verbal and kind of out there with your personality all the time. There are other cultures where introversion is more valued. So if you think of the Japanese culture, there's a lot of pressure in that society to actually keep your thoughts to yourself, be reserved, speak when invited to speak, and contribute that way, but certainly don't go crazy with the self-expression. So in both of those situations, the people living in that culture, they're still about half and half with each preference, and people are adjusting. And that's what we get good at. We are intended to use beyond our default settings. But when we do that, it takes more energy. So that's the other thing you can walk away with today. There is some benefits to learning how to interact with others. But if you see something for yourself, then it's also really beneficial to self-management, because we realize, wow, I'm just exhausted from that. Maybe you were busy using your opposite preference all day long and it tired you out more. It just took more energy to be doing the opposite thing all day long and be outside your comfort zone. And so you can give yourself a little bit of grace for that, and know that how to replenish your stockpile of energy and how to be good to yourself then. All right, let's keep going. Thank you. So we've talked about what we're paying attention to and where we're getting energized, the people and activities going on around us, or our time for reflection. We've talked about how we prefer to take in information, details first or big picture first. Now let's talk about how we make decisions about that information. What is our preferred way to make decisions if we get to do it however we want to do it? And this one is really about whether we want to be objective or empathetic. So those who have a preference for making decisions in an objective, analytical way, they really want to step back and get an objective view of the situation. And they want to be very methodical in considering all of the pros and cons and making a decision. They are actually striving for a decision that creates kind of a standard. Like, let's decide something that could be applied in very similar situations over and over again. What is going to be the best standard for this going forward? That's what they're striving for. They love things like the 80-20 rule. Well, if we can just make a decision that works 80% of the time, that's a good decision, right? They will say that they want to make a fair decision. And when they use the word fair, they mean I want everyone treated equally. I want something that can be equally applied to everyone. Now, on the opposite side of that, those who really prefer to use empathy in decision making, they are wanting to step in to a situation and empathize with everyone involved. They will spend a lot of time putting themselves in the shoes of all of the people in the situation and saying things like, I'm imagining what that is like to, if this were me, this would be happening. This is how I might feel. They're making decisions based on personal values. And what they're striving for is harmony. They want all of their relationships to be intact when this decision is made, so that everyone is, all of the relationships are intact. There is harmony as a result of making this decision for all of the people involved, okay? And they will also say, I want to make a decision that's fair. And when they use the word fair, they mean I want everyone treated as an individual. Let's make a decision where we can consider each person's individual circumstances. So this often ends up in conflict because groups of people will be making decisions and they'll all be saying, I just want it to be fair. Yes, I want it to be fair too, but they have a different meaning. Those who are objective in their approach want a decision where everyone is treated equally. And those who are empathetic in their approach want everyone treated as an individual. Okay, so what can you observe about others to get some clues about their preferred mode of decision making? First of all, you will hear it in language. People who prefer to be objective will often say that. Well, let's take a step back. Well, let's get a little bit of distance from that. And they will be verbalizing that. Those who prefer to use empathy, they are going to be saying things like, well, let's imagine what it's like to be them. Well, I'm thinking about if this were me, and they will express what that person is likely to be thinking or feeling. How might you adjust if you determine that this person has a very specific way that they like to approach decision making? You actually want to match what they're doing with what you're doing. So you're endorsing their approach and you're contributing in their way. So if somebody is being objective, you might want to be saying things like, that's an objective way for us to analyze this. If someone is being empathetic, you could say things like, well, if it were me, I would feel this way. Or I know somebody like that, and they would tell me this. So you're contributing to that process of being empathetic, or you're contributing to that process of being objective. Again, What's the most powerful thing you can do if you don't know? If this person has not yet given you enough clues about how they make decisions, or if this person is constantly using both preferences, you can ask. And what would that be like? You would say something like, would you like to take a step back so we can be objective? Or would you like to focus on each of the people involved? And again, they will tell you, people who want to be objective, oh yeah, let's take a step back. They will absolutely welcome that. That will be a sigh of, that is the right way for us to think about making this decision. Or if they're empathizing, they really want help empathizing. And let's do imagine. I'm trying to think of all of the people involved. And so you can support them being best at making a decision. Now, this might be a decision in a moment. They're making decisions all day long. People are making decisions all day long. And one little phrase that you do one way or the other, it's, again, you're endorsing what they want to do naturally, or you're contributing to what they're doing naturally. And that is actually being easy to work with and supporting them. All right, let's talk about the last pair of preferences. And this one has to do with, I like to call it, how we like the world to be if we can have it be any way we want it, which is not something we get very often. But let's imagine you actually have a free Saturday and it can go any way you want it to go. What that means is some people are born with a preference that says, well, I want to plan for how I'm going to use my Saturday. They actually prefer things are scheduled and organized, and that we have processes and methodologies for everything we do. They value structure. They're going to go a little crazy or feel a little uncomfortable if there's no plan and no structure. Okay? Those people really like having things decided. Even if they say, I'm going to do nothing, I'm going to give myself free time to do nothing, they have probably planned exactly that amount of time, and they've essentially given themselves permission to do nothing. Okay, that's one side of the coin. On the opposite side, free Saturday, you can have the world be any way you want it to be. There are people that prefer to be completely spontaneous. I don't think we should have any plan at all. I want to be flexible. I am great at adapting and changing course. Let's keep things loose and go with the flow. These people like to keep their options open, and there's always a better option coming. So why would we settle on a plan? We should keep all of our options open and just go with the flow. There's always a better option coming right around the corner. Okay? That's how they prefer the world to be. Now, again, most often the world is pretty scheduled and structured. So the people who like things loose are doing a lot of adapting all the time. There's also value in having this tension between let's decide something, let's have things decided, and let's seek out options. Let's keep our options open. That is a valuable and natural tension that actually can benefit groups of people making decisions. So that's way we're not rushing to decisions, and we are not never making decisions. We actually want that tension to some extent. Okay. So what clues will you have? This is actually one when people are allowed to be their natural selves and the way they want it to be. They'll give you a lot of clues about this. And it really will be, you'll notice that people who prefer things to be planned and scheduled will talk a lot about time. They tend to be on time. They're often keeping track of managing how much time we have left. They are very clear about having activities after however much time you have. They will ask you how much time you need. How much time are you going to need to set up? How much time is this going to take? And they're very interested in estimating things all of the time because they're scheduling. The opposite preference may not even know what time it is. They are really good at going with the flow. They will adjust if things go long. They actually like the idea of not knowing how long something is going to take. That's more comfortable for them to not be constrained by worrying about what time it is or how much time something should be taking. Okay, so those are easy clues to watch for. Here's a simple adjustment you can make that really makes a difference, because remember, it's about this tension between having something decided and keeping options open. And if somebody who likes to keep things loose and keep their options open, if they're being pressured to make a decision, this creates a lot of stress and anxiety. So you say those words, well, you have to decide. I need a decision. Really uncomfortable, high level of discomfort for this person. And there's going to be a lot of unconscious resistance to that. So I've really adapted this practice of using the word choose instead of decide. It's interesting. And I do this with everybody. It's just an easy substitute to make in my day-to-day language. So when that word decide comes from the root word, CIDE, it is about killing something off. So the word decide has more of a serious connotation. I'm making a decision and this is a final thing. And all of those options that I had are no longer available to me because I had to decide. So unconsciously, there's a lot associated with that word. Versus if you can use the word choose. So we've talked about several options. Do you have one you can choose now? Something like that. It's a little bit lighter. It's a little bit friendlier. It implies that all of these options are still available to us. We're just going to choose one. And that is an easy adjustment to make that actually reduces a lot of that unconscious stress that somebody might have when needing to make a decision. Now, again, the people who are planned, and I confess I'm one of them, love to have things decided. So this also helps me tone down my natural inclination to pressure people to decide stuff. Other things you can do. So you're going in and you're setting up for a shoot, and this is a person who wants many options. I assure you, they will want an infinite number of options. And you will start to decide, they don't like anything I've done so far. That is not the case. They're happy with all of the options. It's just that they live in this world where there's always a better option coming. So if you keep asking them if they want more options or want to see something else, the answer is always yes. Okay. So you can help manage that a little bit by walking and you say, I'm going to set up 3 options, or I'm going to give you a way of looking at 3 different options that we might use for this, and then you can choose. Okay. That way you're already assuring somebody they're going to have options. You're essentially talking about having a specific number of options before you move forward. And again, you're using that word choose, and then you can choose. And it also implies an opportunity to get some feedback from them. What do they like about this option versus that option? Otherwise, if it's just, I'll show you another option, would you like to see another option? Again, the answer is going to be yes. And they won't necessarily even have given you feedback on the options they've already seen. They may be happy with every option and happy to keep seeing options all day long. So that's one thing that you can do. You definitely want to get used to talking about surfacing options. Now, if you're working with somebody who prefers things to be scheduled and planned, that person is likely to be overwhelmed by having too many options. So in that case, you want to say, we're going to look at 2 options, or you want to listen for clues when you're saying things like do we need another option? And they're going to be, no, that we have enough options. That's what that's about. That is about the fact that this person has this unconscious desire to have something decided, and having more options delays having that decision be made. Too many options are overwhelming to some people. And you can really start to pick up on that, and then you can narrow it down. And you can then start to that person, you want to say things like, I think we have enough to really choose what we're going to do next. You know, this is great. We know enough to choose. And that reassures them that it is time. Yay, we get to make a decision. We get to choose something. We're going to be able to move on. Okay, so let's go over what we've done and what we've talked about. We talked about the fact that this assessment is based on having innate preferences, things that we're born with, like default settings on a device. We can use all of the settings. We all can become equally good at all of the preferences, but some come so naturally to us that they take less energy. We do it without thinking. It's really our comfort zone. And that may be a preference for extroversion or introversion, which is what gives us energy and what we're paying attention to, what really draws our attention. The outer world of people and activities going on around us, or our inner world of our own thoughts and reflections and ideas. And then the next one we talked about is how we take in information. Do we want details first so we can build to a conclusion? Or do we want to start with the big picture so we know where to put those details, that we have a home for those details? And then how are we going to make decisions? Would we prefer to step back and get an objective view so that we can come up with a standard that would work for many similar situations? Or do we want to step in and empathize with all of the people involved so that we can strive for harmony in all those relationships and come up with a decision based on values? Again, we can all do both. We can all make decisions both of those ways. One is really more of our favorite. And then lastly, how do we like the world to be if we could have it be any way we want? And the way that comes up is big difference between people who really like things scheduled and planned. They want to have things decided, versus people who really want to keep their options open. They're very good at being flexible, keeping it loose, changing and adapting course. And how do we best interact with each of those preferences to make it that we are easy to work with? All right, so we've talked about those. I did not give you kind of the distribution of each of those in the general population. In most cases, it's safe to say that people are about half and half. So definitely between extroversion and introversion, it's really like 50-50. Between those who like details versus those who like big picture, that's the more dramatic distribution. The people who like details are closer to 75%. And the people who want big picture, about a quarter of the people that you meet. So the majority of people are really going to work in that detailed world in the present, using their 5 senses and trusting the experience they have with those senses. And then the other two, the people who make decisions, again, closer to half and half. And then the same thing with the distribution of the people who want things scheduled versus the people who want to keep their options open. Slightly more people want things scheduled, but not even quite 60%. It is definitely, you can just know that the world's made up really closer to about half and half of people who like it each of those ways as well. questions. What questions do we have about any of the things that I've shared or anything else?
Okay, so I'll chime in. I've been thinking of a lot of different situations kind of as you've been going through. And I think all of this information will be so valuable, especially when we're reaching out to new clients and being able to pick up on those cues to know it'll be really valuable in a sales situation. So all of that will be really a great help. Also, I'm just thinking, like, I've had situations where, specifically as a photographer, depending on who you're working with, like yesterday I had a situation, so I'm shooting the front exterior. Option A would be the 6 trash cans are going to be in the picture. Option B is there's a tree right in front of the house. Option C is that we're shooting from the garage, so it's not going to be a good picture. And so this is one where the agent is right over my shoulder. And I was like, okay, well, I think what I'm going to have to do is give you a few options. So I just shot them all, and I'm like, I'll send them all to you and you can choose, because there was no good way to do that. So maybe that's a bad example, but
no, it's a great example, Tammy. Thank you for that, because even just notice in your case how frustrating it was for you to say, I've actually been seeking a lot of options. In that case, you needed to, because you couldn't find a good option. So here you were, whether it's your comfort zone or not, you're continuing to try to surface more options. So the people who prefer that are great at that. Again, they're not uncomfortable when they haven't yet found the option that works, because there's always another great option out there.
Right.
But the one thing that really works there is to verbalize what's going on. I looked at 3 different options. I'm not loving any of them. And I couldn't find another. My professional recommendation would be this, because in that case, you're essentially appealing to both. You're making a recommendation, and you're also talking about the fact that you looked at a lot of options. And for you're sharing your expertise.
Yes, that's all. Yes, that's all good. And luckily, so this agent, he was satisfied with those options, but I've worked with others who would be like, well, what else could we do? What else could we do? So yeah, it's definitely.
They are the ones. And that's when you want to say, it helps to quantify. We've looked at 5 options. I think we can choose now. This would be a good time to choose. Let's choose one to work with. And again, in that case, you're always talking about all the options are open, but we're going to choose one to develop further. Let's choose one to work on.
Yes. Oh, thank you for that. Let's see, do we have any other questions?
I noticed
a question while you look. Is it possible for your type to change? Because especially like with introversion, extroversion, I know that I'm a natural introvert, but I know that in settings I can be, whatever I need to be in that moment. But can it change?
So this is one of the questions that I get the most, and I really like being able to answer this. So thank you. What I would say is the theory says that it's an inborn preference. So whatever those inborn default settings are, that wouldn't change because it was there when we were born. But what we notice is the world is having us adapt and use the opposite preference all the time. So especially with adults, it can be hard for somebody to decide, I'm not sure which preference I have, because if they think about who they need to be at work, or they think about, who they get to be with their family, they might be very opposite things, and they might have grown essentially comfortable with either. So it's almost hard for them to say, I'm not sure which one I was born with, because now I've equally developed all of them. And that's what can have us feel like, I think my type has changed. I think I'm more this than I was. And that really is about us growing and developing. So the human development of the theory would be that we do start to get very good at all of the preferences. The other interesting thing that can happen is we may notice that suddenly, at some point in our life, we start getting really interested in things we were not interested in before. So let's say there's somebody who tends to be really analytical and detailed, and they've spent a good chunk of their career as an accountant, and they just have been very satisfied in that world of being analytical and having precision and order and structure. And they suddenly are really interested in art or theater or exploring something that seems completely opposite. In that case, we tend to do this because we do want to continue to grow and develop. And we may start exploring those opposite preferences that we haven't used as much. People who are really scheduled and structured all their lives may suddenly be completely go with the flow. And everybody's like, what has gone into them? They're just actually practicing. What is it like to be these crazy people who don't have a plan or a schedule? And they'll just indulge in that. Like it feels a little naughty and risky, but they notice they're growing and developing, and they notice, wow, I'm kind of fine. The world didn't end. Nothing bad happened to me because I went and used that opposite preference. So it tends to be that that's what's going on versus this experience of people thinking, I think I've changed. What I would love to do, though, is I will share my screen and a final slide, because it's very easy to take this assessment. If those of you who've done it before and you're curious and want to do it again, I'll give you the link to do this online. And I'm also happy to work with individuals. This is one of the things that I do a lot with high school students, college students, and other working professionals, because I do find this really valuable, and people appreciate it. So let me share that information if you want to do this online. Okay, let me know if you can't see my screen for any reason.
I see it there.
Great. All right. Any other final questions or comments?
I don't see any questions yet, but I so love the analogy of default settings, and it's something I think so many of us can super relate to, because we all have phones, computers, and everything, and we get those default settings, and many of us tweak those things to make it work for us. So it was just such a profound analogy that really helped kind of frame everything and even in, with my wife, to understand better how to, it's great to look at it from a real estate world and photography. It's even better to look at it from, the framework of my home and my daughter and my wife, and, to make sure that I understand how I can better communicate and share and even understand, just some of those opposite preferences, and better, manage that time rather than live in a world of frustration. So,
well, you just said that so beautifully, because what tends to happen, especially if we're trapped in our own thoughts and we're working with somebody, that suddenly we decide this person is being difficult. And we may even decide, oh my God, they are just being that way to annoy me. Those are the thoughts that we will have. Like, okay, this person is intentionally driving me crazy. In reality, they're just being more of who they want to be, and they're in their comfort zone. And if it's opposite yours, it can really feel like they are intentionally being difficult, because why would anybody want to approach it that way or be that way? And it's so helpful to know that there's opposite ways, and that's all that person is doing. It's not deliberate, it's not intentional, it's not mean. And now you can actually be the one to accommodate others and have everybody walk away just going, they're just so easy to work with. I don't quite know why. I can't put my finger on it, but always easy to work with. And that can
So
be you.
awesome.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much. It's really been a privilege to spend time with you today. I'm very intrigued by what your company's doing, by the technology and what it makes possible. So I think it's very exciting and happy to be part of it in even a small way.
Absolutely, and
Oh,
thank you so much. Your input and information today has been invaluable, and I hope that everybody else received as much as I did from it. Because again, there's so many pieces when we take that introspective look and understand how we can, you know, we can tweak our own preferences and do things like you said to make ourselves better to work with, and also just to change and shift the world around us. So I think it's been invaluable. I loved it. Tammy, do you have any closing comments?
no, I feel the same. I mean, it just, you sort of lose track of thinking about that. So it's a good reminder that, like Cassa says, no one is intentionally trying to irritate anyone else. We're just kind of going through the world on our default settings. So being more sensitive to that and being able to adjust what you're doing and just keeping that in mind before you lose that person, and just being able to kind of chameleon and adapt to how they prefer to the interaction to be. It just is helpful for everyone.
Agreed. And sometimes it's good to
So
hit
well
that
said.
reset button to get back to default.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I want my default settings.
That's so
I
awesome.
love that.
We appreciate everyone for joining us today. We've had such an incredible conversation. Thank you again, Cassa, for joining us and sharing
Thank you
again
all.
some great reminders, some great information to help us get back to where we need, actually not even get back. Sometimes we need to spring forward into something different. So thank you for the reminders. Thank you for the information. And thank you everyone for joining us. We look forward to the next one, and we look forward to seeing you in our online Facebook group and everywhere else on social media. So again, thank you for your participation, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Enjoy your day.
Bye.